Patty Pie and the Pointy Shoes. For years, I never told anyone the story of the pointy shoes. Not my parents, not my sisters, or my friends. It was something that I kept completely to myself. My own sinister little secret, if you will. It was an incident in my life that only lasted for 5 hours, but seemed like an eternity. It happened to me when I was 7 years old, but I remember it like it was last night. My dad's brother, my Uncle James, had a small pig farm in southern Indiana. He was married to my Aunt Helen and had 3 kids just like our family. However, where my parents had 2 daughters and me, James and Helen had 2 sons and 1 daughter. The boys, JJ and Max, were aged 10 and 11. Their sister, Patricia, was older than the rest of us. I believe she was 15 or 16 at the time of the story. She was an odd girl, to say the least. My sisters and I never quite trusted her for various reasons, but it was kind of a known thing within the family that Patricia was someone you had to keep an eye on. On the day of the Pointy Shoes incident, my dad and I were visiting the farm. For reasons I can't quite recall, I ended up being left there by my dad to spend the night. I remember I didn't really want to, but also didn't want to hurt my aunt's feelings, so I didn't speak up. Needless to say, that was the one and only time I would ever spend the night on the farm. When it came time for my dad to leave, he tasseled my hair with his hand and told me he would be back to get me in the morning. I remember when I turned around to join the others, Patricia was looking at me with a strange, knowing look on her face. She knew I was uncomfortable to be there, and I could tell it pleased her. There was still a few hours of daylight left when my dad's truck pulled out of the drive. That time was spent playing with my cousins around the farm. JJ and Max took me down to the chicken coop to show me how things worked on a farm. I have to admit, at age 7, I was pretty intrigued by it all. That is, until Patricia spoke up from behind us. One thing I forgot to mention was that my cousin Patricia had this weird habit of making us younger kids call her Patty Pie when there were no grown-ups around. So Patty Pie surprises us from behind the chicken coop and tells us she wants to show us something. My cousins JJ and Max were good-hearted and fun kids to hang around, but even they seemed powerless around Patty Pie. Whatever she would suggest, we all would go along with, even though her intentions never seemed kind. The farm had an old silo on the property. It was old and decrepit, and looking back now, probably hadn't been used in a good 5 to 10 years. My cousin Patricia suggested that we play a game called Killers Are Coming. She instructed us to break off into pairs. One pair would hide, and the other pair would search while chanting the line, "Killers are coming." Patty Pie told us she had learned it from some movie. She also volunteered to be my partner, and I remember feeling my stomach drop at that news. I didn't want to be around her without the boys. Of course, I was too shy and scared to protest, so off I went with Patricia to hide. I immediately knew where we were going. I could read the look in Patty Pie's eyes. She wanted to hide in the silo, and that's exactly where she led me. As the boys gave us proper time to hide, Patty Pie led me to and around the silo to the back side. There was a door on that side. Patty Pie said we should get in because it was by far the best hiding spot on the farm. She opened the door, and to this day, I still remember the smell that came out from inside the silo. It smelled of damp, dark stuff, like someplace that hadn't seen sunshine in a very long time. Patty Pie pushes me in so forcefully that I actually stumbled over and landed on my side. Then, instead of coming in the silo with me, she slams the door shut. The blackness was instant, and so was my fear. I remember immediately being angry at my father. Why would he leave me here? Couldn't he see that I didn't want to stay? I pictured my parents and sisters sitting around the dinner table, smiling and laughing, and I was stuck in this smelly old silo. I was in here, in the pitch dark nothing. My mind began to imagine horrifying situations. I pictured an old farmer's hand flicking the switch on the grain elevator, and the silo began to fill up until I was buried beneath. I pictured something dark and sinister lurking in the silo with me and ready to attack at any moment. I began to freak out and started yelling for someone to get me out. That's when I heard laughter. She was right outside the door listening to me and laughing. I pictured Patty Pie standing there with a red smile spreading clear across her face like some gross wound. Suddenly, it occurred to me that for as scared as I was stuck inside the dark silo, I actually was happy she wasn't in there with me. Eventually, after what seemed like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, I heard the boys' voices. They were coming to find us and were close. I heard movement, and with a loud creak, the silo door opened. The daylight was blinding at first to my eyes. Eventually, they adjusted themselves, and Patty Pie was there. She just gave me a look of utter disgust. And then the boys were there. We walked back to the house and didn't play any more of that game. Patricia never mentioned the incident to me, and that was the end of it. It would not, however, be the last time Patty Pie was outside my door. I remember few details about that evening until the Pointy Shoes incident. I know we had dinner and played a few games of aggravation, a marble and dice board game. I recall Patricia did not play the board game. I then remember going to bed. For reasons still unknown to me, I was put in the spare bedroom to sleep by myself. I thought it was strange that I couldn't sleep in with the boys' room, but decided best not to mention it. The farmhouse was old with uneven wood floors. One could not find a square inch that didn't creak when stepped on. When my Aunt Helen wished me a good night and turned off the lights, I immediately noticed there was a 2 to 3 inch gap beneath the door and floor. The light from the hallway bathroom would come through that gap and act as a nightlight. I was happy to have it. I drifted off to sleep. Something woke me from my sleep at around midnight. It was about 10 minutes of trying to go back to sleep when I heard the creak of Patty Pie's door. It could have been any door in the house, but I knew it was hers. I could hear each step, creak toward my door. I was paralyzed with fear. I pulled the cover up tight around me and peeked at the door through my fingers. When the steps were right outside my door, I could see the shoes through the gap of the door. They were black and pointy. They arrived at the door and just stopped. I lay there clutching the blanket and staring at those feet. The shoes were off-putting. I could not move. I could only stare at the pointy shoes. Patty Pie was right outside that door, and she was probably showing that horrifying smile of hers. And she was going to do something really bad to me, and I couldn't even move. I could just lay there and wait. At some point, I remember peeing myself. This game went on for what had to be at least 5 hours. I never once took my eyes off the shoe, and the door never opened. She just stood outside and listened to me breathing. Finally, the first sign of sunrise came to the window, and eventually I fell asleep. When I woke, the pointy shoes were gone. I didn't see Patricia the next day. My dad picked me up in the morning, and she had not yet come out of her room. I recall being very tired on the way home from being up all night watching that door and those horrible, pointy shoes. I fell asleep in the car and never spoke of the incident to my family. I never spent the night over at their house again. I told my dad I didn't want to, and he seemed to silently understand. I also never brought it up to Patricia in the remaining years of her life. She died in an automobile accident at the age of 25. They said she survived the initial crash, but was consumed by the flames. When I learned of the manner of her death, my first thought was that Patty Pie had returned to the flames of hell from whence she came. I did not attend her funeral. I always pictured her rotting in her coffin with that sinister smile spread across her face and the pointy shoes on her cold, lifeless feet.